The 2019 Formula 1 season opener may not go down in history as one of the best, but it was a fairly enjoyable race, in my opinion. The late push for fastest lap gave a little added excitement, and I think that's a sign it could make things interesting later in the season. So we're counting down the top 10 Formula 1 season openers. Before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe and tap that notification bell to stay up to date with all our content. Straight in at number 10, the 1955 Argentine Grand Prix. The Argentine Grand Prix was a thrilling mess of car swaps, driver swaps, lead changes and exhaustion. Even before the heat began to force drivers to go into the pits for a rest, fans were entertained by a multi-car fight for the lead. Home hero Juan Manuel Fangio took the lead off the line, but was soon demoted to second as Alberto Ascari took the lead. Then Froilán González passed for P1. Ascari was taken out of the race when he made a mistake and crashed, but in the era of teammates giving up cars for the number one driver, he wasn't able to jump into another Lancia. Gigi Villavesi had already crashed twice, once in his own car and once in Eugenio Castellotti's, meaning Ascari would have to sit and watch at the sidelines. He was soon joined by many of those he had been challenging, as the Argentine heat meant Farina and González had to hand over their cars to rest. Fangio was one of only two drivers not to share their car that race, the other being Roberto Mires. He stopped for water but powered on to take the victory, 1.5 minutes ahead of the González-Farina Trintignant Ferrari after 96 laps. At number 9 is the 1996 Australian Grand Prix. This is a race we've already talked about in our top 10 F1 debuts, but it is definitely on a position on this list too. Debutant Jack Villeneuve was able to hold off attacks from experienced teammate Damon Hill throughout most of the race. Unfortunately, when a mistake meant he was leaking oil, the Williams team told him to let Hill pass, denying him the victory on his debut. But it wasn't only the Williams teammates that brought excitement to the race. The race started in a dramatic fashion when Martin Brundle was launched off the back of David Coulthard and Johnny Herbert's cars. Brundle's Jordan was broken too and the red flags were brought out. Moving on to number 8 is the 2009 Australian Grand Prix. Williams may not have stormed the field in Australia this weekend, but 10 years ago another team took everyone by surprise at the opening race of the season. Jenson Button showed us what was to come when he took pole for Brawn in the team's F1 debut at the 2009 Australian Grand Prix. The Brits stormed off the line and, despite the safety car restart, was unchallenged throughout the race. In fact, it seemed only Brawn itself could deny Button glory, when a slow pit cut his gap to Vettel to just 1.5 seconds. But Vettel had other concerns, with Robert Kubica rapidly closing in. The pair tangled at turn 3 with 3 laps to go and then crashed with damaged suspension on the following straight, bringing out another safety car which the race would end behind. Rubens Barrichello made it at Brawn 1-2 after falling back at the start of the race. Jarno Trulli joined them on the podium, though he was later given a 25-second penalty for overtaking Lewis Hamilton under safety car conditions. That was later overturned when it was discovered McLaren had intentionally misled the stewards and Trulli had earned the podium legally. Hamilton was disqualified. At number 7 it's back to South America for the 1980 Argentine Grand Prix. Australian Alan Jones's race looks simple if you only consult the stats. The Williams driver qualified on pole, took the fastest lap and won the race. And for the first 17 laps it was that simple. He shot away from the line and though Nelson Piquet, Jack Laffite and Carlos Reutemann chased after him, none can challenge the Williams. Then a simple plastic bag became caught in Jones's radiator, causing the car to overheat. He came into the pits to remove it and dropped to 4th. Over the next 12 laps he forced his way up through the order, eventually passing Laffite for the lead as the Frenchman hit engine troubles. Jones extended his lead to more than 24 seconds over Piquet to start what would be his championship-winning year. And number 6 is the 1989 Brazilian Grand Prix. When reigning champion Ayrton Senna took pole in Brazil, it looked like he would finally take an F1 victory on his home soil. That all went out the window though when a fast-started Gerhard Berger drives up the inside in turn 1 and collided with him. As Senna limped back to the pits and Berger retired, Thierry Boutsen took the lead ahead of Nigel Mansell. Mansell wasn't at all confident his Ferrari would survive the race. He'd even booked an early flight out of Brazil, he was so sure he'd hit a mechanical failure. But it wasn't long before Mansell sailed past Boutsen into the race lead. Alain Prost, running a non-stop strategy, inherited the lead when Mansell pit. But the Ferrari quickly reeled in Prost and shot everyone by passing the Frenchman. The pair swapped places again when Mansell pitted a second time, but with worn tyres, Prost couldn't stop Mansell retaking the lead again. The Ferrari took the first win of the year ahead of Prost and Mauricio Gugelmin. At number 5 is the 2002 Australian Grand Prix. The start of the 2002 Australian Grand Prix has to be one of the most spectacular in F1 history. Ralf Schumacher ran into the back of Rubens Barrichello at the first corner, sending Schumacher flying, literally. Further back, cars tried to avoid one another as they took to the grass, spinning about on track. Jenson Button's car caught fire as he tried to limp on. 8 drivers retired on the spot. David Coulthard inherited the lead with Jarno Trulli, Juan Pablo Montoya and Michael Schumacher following him behind the safety car. When racing resumed, Schumacher immediately went on the hunt, passing Montoya and closing onto the back of Trulli. A mistake from the Renault driver gave Schumacher his next opportunity as Trulli spun into the wall and brought out a safety car, but it was Montoya leading when the race restarted. Coulthard locked up as the safety car pulled in and Montoya and Schumacher ran side by side on the following straight. Montoya just nosed ahead, but Schumacher stayed with him, retaking the lead on lap 17. From then on, it was a masterclass from the reigning champion, who extended his advantage to more than 18 seconds over Montoya. In at number 4 is the 2008 Australian Grand Prix. 2008 and the Australian Grand Prix once again started in chaos. Multiple incidents up and down the pits meant 5 drivers were wiped out on the opening lap, while Felipe Massa and Kazuki Nakajima had to pit for new front wings. Massa wasn't out of the walls yet though, as he collided with David Coulthard on lap 25, and once again there was a car flying in Australia after contact with a Ferrari. Massa's engine failed just a few laps later. On the restart, Raikkonen immediately pounced on the second place Heikki Kovalainen in the battle for second, but Kovalainen held on and looked set for a comfortable P2. But another safety car would undo his race. Just before the McLaren was due into the pits for his final stop, the safety car was brought out again, Timo Glock having left pieces of his Toyota over the track as he ran wide. The pits closed and Kovalainen dropped to the back of the field in order to keep going until he was able to come in. Raikkonen would also not finish second, an engine problem cutting his race short 5 laps before the checkered flag. Among all the chaos, it was easy to miss Lewis Hamilton driving a solid race at the front of the field. The Brit didn't put a wheel wrong, and despite the frequent safety car periods, finished 5 seconds ahead of Nick Heidfeld in second. At number 3 we have the 1982 South African Grand Prix. At the time, Alan Prost described the 1982 South African Grand Prix in his best. Granted, it was only his 4th win, but it still holds up as a standout performance. Prost had been leading when a puncture forced him to slow. As he nursed his Renault back to the pits, the tyre came off the rim completely. New rubber was fitted and Prost emerged P8 and a lap down, but the Frenchman sped through the order, picking off driver after driver until he was back on the tail of his teammate René Arnoux, who had started from pole but fallen behind Prost early on. Prost reclaimed the lead 10 laps before the checkered flag and held on to finish almost 15 seconds ahead of Carlos Reutemann. The drama took place off-track as well as on, with most of the field striking pre-race in protest of the new super licence points. Led by the returning Niki Lauda, who finished 4th, they boycotted Thursday practice, which resulted in stewards revoking the licences of everyone participating in the protest after the race. The FIA Court of Appeal later reduced the penalty. It's back to Australia for our number 2, the 2003 Australian Grand Prix. When David Coulthard lined up 11th in Australia, he probably wasn't expecting to take the victory. Such was the chaotic race that would follow. Everyone expected Michael Schumacher to continue to dominate, and for most of the race it seemed they might be right. He lost the lead for several laps when he pitted, with Juan Pablo Montoya and Kimi Raikkonen both taking turns to lead, but it wasn't long before the reigning champion was back at the sharp end of the field. Late in the race, whilst battling with Raikkonen for second, the pair knocked wheels and Schumacher was forced over the curb, damaging the underside of his car. Trailing debris, Schumacher pushed on, regaining the lead when Montoya pitted and Raikkonen was given a drive-through for speeding in the pit lane. But Schumacher was shot in the black and orange meatball flag and called into the pits to repair the car. Coulthard took the lead and held on to take victory, becoming the first person other than Schumacher to lead the championship in 2.5 years. Schumacher could only manage 4th behind Montoya and Raikkonen. And finally, at number 1 we have the 1990 United States Grand Prix. The 1990 United States Grand Prix was defined by an epic battle between Ayrton Senna and Gina Lacey for the lead. The Tyrrell driver had started P4 but quickly shot into the lead and set about building a gap to Gerhard Berger. Senna, starting 5th, had a slower climb up through the order but was up to 3rd by the end of lap 4. It took another 4 laps for him to pass Berger when Berger lost the rear of his McLaren and slid into a wall. Senna was now 6 seconds behind Lacey, but he didn't immediately close the gap to the Frenchman. Instead, he waited to see how Lacey's tyres would do, and only when it became obvious he had all the grip he needed did Senna reel in the Tyrrell. The pair began an amazing scrap, with Senna briefly able to get a pass at the start of lap 34, only for Lacey to snatch the position back at the next corner. A lap later, Senna got past again at the same corner, and this time he was able to make it stick. Alesi tried to stay with him, but Senna was eventually able to pull away, finishing 8 seconds ahead of Alesi. Thierry Boutsen took third after a fantastic battle for the final podium position, which involved Andrea de Cesaris, Nelson Piquet, Alain Prost with an oil leak, and briefly the lap Gerhard Berger, who came into the pits after hitting the wall. So there you have it. Those are our top 10 season openers in F1 history. Are there any we missed? Would you put the 2019 race on this list? Let us know in the comments below. The 2019